everybody. And now let's talk automation.
Happy Third Thursday. It said it in the intro. I'm going to say it again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We have got an all-star crew together today, and I'm going to let them handle their introductions before we get going. But as is traditional, as we're doing introductions, we're also going to have an icebreaker question. And I think this is one that everybody on the line is going to have an opinion on today. So as we're doing our introductions, we're going to share our least favorite term for the industry, or most loathed term for the industry. And so we're going to get started with Mike. I'm going to come to you. If you could give everybody a quick introduction as well as diving into that least favorite term.
I've got so many least favorite terms. That's the only problem. Anyway, my name is Mike Hobday. I'm Chief Executive of AntWorks. I've been with AntWorks for 2 years now, as in September this month. Before that, I was General Manager for Automation at IBM across Europe. And actually, I'm going to have 3, just to be annoying. So the words I hate are ones which are undefined. So bots and digital are things that get latched onto everything that I do, and nobody ever bothers to define them. And if I wanted to be really awkward, I'd say the complex word which I struggle with is trifecta. There you go, try that.
Wonderful. Thank you for getting us started. And I also neglected to tell everybody to make sure as you're coming into the chat to throw in where you're joining us from, in addition to answering this icebreaker question. We'll keep an eye on the comments as they're rolling in and maybe throw a couple of them up on the screen as well. So Francis, now I'm going to come to you and allow you to do your introduction and share that least favorite term.
Thank you, Emma. Hey, Mike, isn't trifecta 3 different words? I don't know. Anyway.
3.
So I'm Francis Carden. I'm VP of Robotics and Intelligent Automation at Pegasystems. And I'm coming to you right now from Florida. My least favorite term, you know what? I think every term is fine. It's in the eye of the beholder, right? If you have a term and you believe in it, then it's fine. But I suppose if I push that in, the one that drives me mad right now is the word automation, because it means absolutely everything and anything to everyone. So there you go.
Look at that diplomatic answer, like whatever feels right to you.
Oh,
that's a British Emma, very polite and reserved. Definitely.
Yeah, I'll be the blunt one for today. So Kieran, I'm going to come to you, let you do your introduction and share your thoughts as well.
Hiya, Kieran, the least exalted member of this community. No doubt I've been in automation and digital and IT and analytics for about the last 25 years. So currently I'm a global automation leader for a large international company. The word that I have to say, the word Emma loathe, is elasticity. As Francis said, this industry has come up with the greatest pile of BS in terms of words and terminology to mean absolutely nothing at the time. But elasticity is the one that really, and again, I can do this, stretches me and stretches the credibility of what we're talking about. So this is meant to be that you put in robots and you can expand or contract your workforce. But the worst thing is, Emma, and this is the worst thing of all, I actually used the word elasticity when I met someone and was very serious. It was one of my sins, and I wrote an article, The 20 Bad Habits for Christmas, and asked how many people had actually used any of these bad habits in the automation world, right up with there, that 50 robots equals success. So not only do I hate elasticity, I am guilty of having said it with a very straight face as well.
Eye of the beholder, man.
I have the beholder. And I would say I've probably used all of those terms. And even today, we're going to use the term digital transformation and automation. But hopefully, we're going to be defining it a little bit more to help put it into the right context for the eyes of the beholder. But before we dive into our questions, I do see some folks coming in. So we've got another person here in Wisconsin with me. Good morning, Corinne. And then we've got California. And let's see, where else did I see popping up? I saw some other comments and I've lost them now. A couple of folks from California. So make sure you continue to come into the chat. Oh, we've got some folks from India joining us as well. There was the other comment that I saw. So Francis, I'm going to come to you for this first kind of open-ended question. And going into the idea that these terms have to be defined and you have to understand what you mean when you're talking about them. And the title of our presentation today being that digital transformation failure is not an option. Can you give us your definition of what digital transformation means to you and your context to get us started?
Yeah, so I feel quite passionate about this. That I think Forrester it was that first announced digital transformation is dead. They didn't really mean that it's dead. They just meant that it was overused, and so they defined a new term, digital process automation. I think HFS had the trifecta, OneOffice, etc. Then you've got HyperAutomation, which is Gartner, and then you've got intelligent automation, which is it's like okay. So, but what actually is transformation? Right? It's kind of obvious in one way, but I like to think about what it's not. Automation using things like RPA, automation of the as-is process in order to make it more efficient is a good thing, but the automation of the as-is process is not transformational, right? That's not how a digital native doesn't go out and buy all these processes, these legacy systems and go, oh, let's just make them more automated. That's not how it works. So I think digital transformation to me is where you take the latest and greatest technologies that are really game changers in your industry and give you the ability to compete head to head with some of the new digital native companies that don't have that legacy debt, those legacy processes. They can jump right in and be transformational. Like a digital native doesn't go out and buy 500 legacy systems and think this is great. No, they actually start digital. So for me, digital transformation is to move an enterprise that's maybe more legacy light or and move them to be more like a digital native. And that is, the word transformation is by itself, its definition, but it is not the automation of the as-is processes, as many will try to have you believe. You are on mute, Emma.
Dang it, Kieran. Now I'm never going to hear the end of this, you guys. I tease him so much for doing that. All right. So what I was going to say is you gave me a perfect segue to move over to Mike and go into my next question. So, transformation is not changing our as-is processes. And while we were prepping for this session, Mike, you made a comment of the idea that change is often dressed up as transformation, but it's not actually transformation itself. Can you expand on that idea a little bit and maybe dive into that last point that Francis made?
Yeah, I'm going to start off by unusually agreeing with Francis. I think that when he talked about, RPA and automation and putting robots into your organization, that for me is not transformation at all. What that is about embalming your 20th century redundant processes and joining up largely redundant legacy systems, so that I think is often dressed up as transformation. I think I would refer to as trying to make a dinosaur run a lot faster, but it doesn't actually achieve long-term sustainability. In the light of climate change, I guess. So transformation for me, and these words. I'm very old. These words have been around forever. I mean, I was head of transformation at Barclays. Back in the last century, I was head of transformation at the Prudential. At the beginning of this century, long before we had the word digital, and perhaps we were working with the invention of the internet. So transformation has been around for a long time, and for me, it's about looking at fundamental change, reinventing organizations to create new value, and that means change which is associated with fixing things or reducing cost in particular areas, is absolutely change, and continuous improvement is absolutely necessary to create value. But the true transformation is really reinventing the value for your customers, for your organization, for all of your stakeholders, shareholders, and so forth, right? So, and this idea of tapping the word digital, which was one of my horrible words, which is completely undefined. Nobody really understands it. At the end of the day, for me, the 21st century is about processes where humans touch things only because they have to, or because customers want to speak to somebody, but everything else is a free flow of data from front to back. And I think that's the big change. That's what's coming, and moving away from, what's been happening over the last 10 years, which is what I call islands of transformation, or islands in truth of change, where you fix certain departments or functions, or put in a bit of automation between two systems, which means that a customer going through your organization is enters it with a bit of digital, ends up in an analog department, finds digital somewhere else, and immediately is then into another analog process, and eventually it's in your core systems. So end-to-end visionary change is the nearest thing you'll get to transformation.
Wonderful, thank you. And before I come to you, Kieran, for our next question, I did want to touch on, we've got more comments coming in. So we have some folks from the Philippines, Brazil, Oklahoma, Romania. So we are broadcasting all over the world right now, and it's wonderful to see everybody coming in and throwing so many comments into the chat. It makes it feel like we get to all be here in person, even if we don't.
We should have a live map.
We talked about that. I don't have the skills to do that, but if someone on the line,
we need to transform you digitally.
There we go.
Or evolve.
I feel pretty proud that I've got like the live stream stuff down. We'll have to get to that as like the next evolution of my transformation. So Kieran, I want to come to you. We talked about what the definition of transformation should be and how to differentiate change and transformation. So what is the value to an organization that does this right? And what's the business case for somebody who has this end-to-end transformation? What can they expect as a result?
Okay, let me try and answer that one, because this is one that I'm quite passionate about in terms of my explanation, because the business case can vary for organizations, because obviously different organizations around the globe vary, and that might be different things like increased capacity, reduced E&Os, improved SLAs, happier staff, happier customers, FT headcount reduction, or it could be all of those things. And that is the joy about automating or digitizing your processes or your business, because you gain more than one benefit. I call it a balanced scorecard of benefits that you get at the same time. But, and there is a but here, and I think this but a lot of chief data officers or chief digital officers or chief automation officers are struggling with at the moment, and that is proving the business case for automation or digitization. And by that, I mean, what is the dollar value that your program's actually creating? Now, while you can align your program to your business strategy, and you absolutely should, because you should not be sailing in two different directions, the difficult bit for lots of organizations and lots of automation or digital teams is actually quantifying the business value that their program turns around. And therefore they end up in esoteric or fluffy areas trying to explain, but we have happier staff, but no metrics like NPS, or we have happier customers, but no metrics in terms of SLA. My one is ignore all that for a moment. Of any program in any organization, because it's a commercial enterprise, has to return a dollar value. So if you do improve customer retention, and that's the goal of your business, it still has to turn into a dollar value. For example, improved SLAs, improved turnaround time should result in improved customer satisfaction. That should result in improved retention over a period of time. And that's the task, and sometimes it can be tricky for automation leaders, is how do I tie the investment, and it is considerable, be it a small, a medium, or a global organization, how do I tie my investment in automation or digitization back to a business objective and evidence a dollar number? So the real answer is, if you can evidence how much your program has returned, and that impact has to be real in your P&L, not a cost avoidance or something that you talk to but can't prove on a balance sheet, then you really are in trouble. So for me, the business case is the dollar value return, no matter what benefit you exercise. And there is ways of putting a dollar value to everything. The question is, when you do put a dollar value to a benefit, is it in excess of the program cost? Because if it's not, I would take my money and I would do something else.
Great, thank you. I think that's such an important piece. And I think I'm looking, Arpen, as we've got LinkedIn user here. It's not pulling through your information, but creating the dollar value is the right term, not savings, was one of the comments that we got, because it's easy to talk about soft cost savings as opposed to actually attaching a dollar amount to it. And then one other comment that I wanted to throw up here real quick is that, Mike, you seem to have planted quite the seed and image in everybody's brain when you were talking about making dinosaurs run faster. So now we've got the idea of the dinosaurs on roller skates for the rest of the conversation whenever we hear the term digital transformation moving forward.
I have a comment a little bit as well. So the
Yeah.
question about value, I think that if you think about, since we computerized a process, everybody then, from that point forward continuously works on optimizing it, creating more value, making it cost less. And as Kieran points out, there's got to be an end game, and net promoter scores. But the reality is there comes a point when there's only so much lemon juice you can squeeze out of a lemon. Right, we like metaphors today. So, and digital transformation is making that leap of faith that these technologies are going to take you to the next level, the next generation, if you like, of an automated process that's going to deliver, hopefully, Kieran, right, on that value. But comes a point where you've got to throw away the dinosaur, you've got to throw away the lemon, and you've got to stop embalming. And I think that's probably my takeaway. And these new technologies and even new terms, elasticity of bots isn't a thing. I agree with you. But elasticity of compute power is game-changing for digital transformation. We can get into another discussion what I think that means. So I think we're all kind of in agreement. But I do think we've got to stop automating as is stuff. We're out of juice.
I think the dinosaur analogy is kind of interesting because if you're a large enterprise, then making the dinosaur run faster you have to do, and probably making the dinosaur smaller, which actually happened in evolution, I think, if I go back to my biology classes. And really, if you're creating value out of that, that allows you to invest in becoming a mammal, because climate change in the broader kind of prehistoric version of it, is coming, and that is this idea of the true digital enterprise. And it's very difficult for a large, thousands of person organization to make that transition, and you need to buy time, and that's really where automation is.
I agree. I think it's just a question of how much time have we already bought, right?
Francis, did you just agree with me?
Yeah. That happened twice now.
We got a recording of it as well.
Can I keep this recording?
Yes, we will make it available. So I want to take a little bit of a transition and talk. So we've talked about our viewpoints on this, and now I want to start moving towards a little bit more of the advice that you two have to offer to everybody joining us. And so, Mike, I'm going to come to you, and I want you to talk about the role of data in truly transforming an organization and why you think that's such a critical component. And then Francis, will come to you to get some of that tangible advice as well before we round out for today.
Okay, so if I think back 3 years ago when I was doing some work with Watson at IBM, and I was doing a lot of work with robotic process automation, I was kind of sort of strategically dissatisfied in the sense that, particularly in the RPA space, I was helping to move data from one place to another and move it faster without due consideration for whether that data was accurate or not. And in fact, in reality, in many cases, I was taking data from a spreadsheet or a system, which was probably 30% wrong, and just moving it into the back-end systems more quickly. So that doesn't seem to be terribly fulfilling. And part of my transformation in moving to AntWorks has been about focusing on how do you get organizations to bring in data into their organizations which is accurate and digitized, and get the full value of data, particularly from unstructured data, into their analytical systems as fast as possible. And that's what I'm doing here at AntWorks, I guess. And it kind of links to what Kieran was saying about value. And throughout my career, I've always understood business cases as not just being about cost. They're about new revenue streams, cost reduction, addressing risk, addressing customer satisfaction and retention, addressing employee experience and other stakeholders. So what I'd like to do is give you an example of change becoming transformation. So one of the projects we've been working on is in pet insurance. So the client wants to reduce the cost of claims. So they receive an invoice from a veterinary surgeon, and they come and say, well, we want to be able to process them more quickly. Can we use intelligent document processing to strip the data and make the claim faster? So, but when you realize with AI, machine learning and OCR all wrapped together, is that you can take that invoice and you can get the name of the vet, where the vet is, the name of the pet owner, the name of the pet, the breed of the pet, the problem, the treatment, and the cost of each of the elements, and start to think about, actually, that data has always existed in the company, but all they took was the name of the vet to be paid, the name of the owner of the pet, or probably the policy number, and then made the payment after a quick check. But if you've got all of that data, you can use that data in a different way. So, for example, we know this vet treats this dog with this animal, this illness, with this treatment at this cost, with a better outcome. So actually, any dog with this problem in this area is going to be directed towards that vet. So you can create a set of use cases or scenarios where you're adding value to the customer, improving retention, and all of that. But all of the other data about the condition, the performance, the clients realize, well, I can put that information real time into my underwriting system and outperform my competitors, and actually start to transform my product in a new way. And that's opening up new opportunities. So you take an example of change becoming transformation, you start to realize actually the automation was driving a capture of richer data, and that richer data was then feeding analytical systems and underwriting systems and transforming it. And what does that mean? It means a lower cost. It means more revenue. It means lower operational risk because of greater accuracy in the data being collected, and it means better returns for investors. So that would be my example.
I like that example, and looking at how that unstructured data can change. I like that you took it from change to transformation. And I also just laugh about the idea of pet insurance in general and how much we love our pets and how big of an industry that is.
Myself.
I like the way he got Antworks in there as well. In the next minute, we'll
I didn't mention it.
Who he worked for. Oh, you did. Oh, you did.
It's okay. One mention is all right.
£2 in the jar.
So Francis, I want to come to you now, and I want to talk with you about what advice, and like going back to this idea of pragmatic advice, what advice do you have for organizations to really start taking that step towards true transformation, where we're doing that end-to-end change, as opposed to maybe stopping at the idea of changing our existing processes as is?
Yeah, so I'm a massive fan of firstly, you've got to orchestrate the work and understand how work gets done. And it's often, there's a lot of like, well, if we automate this, we should see this value, back to Kieran's point. But then you go back and ask them what kind of quantities of these kind of transactions occur, and there's and how much does it cost to actually execute those processes. There's like, deer in headlights. Nobody really has the answer. So I think if you start orchestrating work, that's the first thing. Once you understand those inputs and outputs and how work gets done, you can start to then break down the silos of these big processes and start automating, what we would call an outcome for a customer. So let's just say it's onboarding the customer. You know that you do a good job, but you could do a lot better job, or your digital native competitors are doing a phenomenal job and you want to get better. So you can start automating just the onboarding process using these new technologies from end to end, and that means that you could do it without human involvement, with AI involvement, or even human involvement as well. But you've orchestrated that process now end to end in the new digital transformation era using newer technologies. Maybe, Mike will hate me saying it, maybe eliminating paper altogether in some instances. And then you just pick the next, and that we would cast that as a journey, that customer journey for being onboarded. And then we might pick another journey, and the next journey might be to offer them a new insurance plan, or to pay a claim. Each of these things are customer journeys that they have to undertake to interact with you. And people think digital transformation is so big that they're just not going to do it. We'll never be there. We've stuck with our 500 legacy systems forever. But the companies that are really making an impact are picking specific customer journeys where they want a better outcome for that customer and just getting on and doing it. And you can get on and do it in this little tiny window and leave all your other stuff out there. You're not boiling the ocean and throwing it all away yet. You're interacting, maybe using some RPA to interact with legacy systems that don't have integration points. Maybe you're using APIs where they exist. And eventually, once you've completely digitized one of those journeys and processes, you may find out you get less and less need for integration, and you can start burning to extinction. We're going to use the dinosaur analogy, some of those legacy systems, which nobody really knows what they cost. You know, I use the iceberg analogy. What you see on top, it just looks like, here's my cost, so there's my ROI if I make it better. But underneath is that massive iceberg where the cost that IT have to undertake to maintain the system, pay the licenses, make sure the hardware is updated, make sure all the updates and upgrades and security patches are applied. And then suddenly your ROI as a percentage goes from being what you think is 20% to maybe 1% or even minus 1%. And I think it's that visibility to a process, the desire to improve outcomes, one outcome at a time through each journey, digitize that. And we are seeing the big change around automating individual processes digitally, not just making them more efficient. And I think, Mike, you alluded to that as well. You really are on that platform for change, and you've got to be, because the digital natives are coming up behind you fast, maybe already overtaken to you. And I think that I use the way to drive this is be envious. You probably already are, but which journey do your customers undertake, or your competitors' customers undertake with your competitor, where you're envious is a journey better than your own? And if you spot that envy and you focus on that, you can replace that envy and surpass that envy where your competitors are now envious of you, and treat each journey and customer outcome initially with you being envious of someone else doing a better job than you. And I promise you, if you get on the digital transformation bandwagon with things like low code and elasticity and compute power that comes with it, you will make such a difference to your long-term goals as an enterprise, your board, your shareholders, and everyone else. So big picture stuff, sorry.
I like that you brought up that idea of envy, because as soon as you said that, I started thinking of my customers that are truly transforming the way that they do work, and they all have that company, and it's not even in their industry. I think there's a lot of DoorDash and a lot of, like, you know, looking at what is our true digital experience and what are we used to and what is our expectation as a customer, and taking that and flipping it into their industry and figuring out how to mimic those companies that they envy. And so I like that idea a lot. I think that's a really great way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Thank you. I just to reinforce what Francis was saying, really, I think if I were running in a large organization, running a transformation by looking at journeys, the question I'd ask is, why do members of my team or suppliers get involved with the process at all? If you actually mapped your process, I imagine it's a bit like your customer is running a marathon through your organization. But as they progress, there are all sorts of staff standing in the middle of the road, which they have to dodge around to get to the finish line. And they're there because of inefficiencies of your legacy systems, or controls and checks, or because there's reconciliation. And simply putting RPA in those places still leaves those inefficiencies. So a big question is, why do people get involved in a process? Because every time I have a human get involved in a process, they bring in variation.
Well, I mean, you could, there are certain processes where you want a human involved, right? Where you need and compassion and so forth. So building the process.
You're just doing a value assessment of whether it's there because it's good for the customer. But it's a good question to ask, I think.
Absolutely. And I think if you build the process that it doesn't need a human, you can add a human in the loop when you'd like to. That's my point. Yeah.
I was going to say, leave it to you guys to start disagreeing in the last 30 seconds of the broadcast. You've been so kumbaya the entire time.
I think we're saying the right things, and it's the speed to which you want to transform as well. And I think that the competition is driving your need to transform faster.
Yeah.
And so you do not find any digital native company go out and buy RPA or Band-Aids or macros or screen scraping, because digital automation is inherited in the new digital transformation era. Everything you build today can be fully automated in many different ways without you Band-Aiding on top.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
With that note, I'm going to cut you off, Mike, because we are at 10 seconds left.
I need more elasticity.
With that, we'll throw in
Restricts
as
the
many of
time.
these terms as we can here on the end. I know we've heard it before, and I'm guessing we're going to start seeing it in the comments again, that 30 minutes feels really quick and really fast. But I want to encourage everybody to keep going in the comments, and we will come back and interact with these comments after the live stream. And hopefully we can keep the conversation going. But thank you, everybody, for joining us for Third Thursday. Francis and Mike, thank you for being our honored guests.
Thank you.
And have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, chaps.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Emma.